Finovate showcases cutting-edge banking and financial technology through a global conference series featuring short-form demos and thought leadership. Now, the conversation continues on the Finovate podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Finovate podcast. We are turning our attention to FinovateEurope, which is coming up in London next week. And joining me, we have Andy Wisbey, VP of Sales for Europe at Plotly. Andy is actually going to be on stage next week at FinovateEurope, or he was on stage last week, depending on when you're listening to this. Andy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Greg, for taking the time.
So I'd like to start by just having you give a quick introduction of yourself and Plotly and let our listeners know what you're all about.
Of course. So I look after Plotly in Europe. I'm based out of London. Plotly is a data application company. So we're Python-based. We come out of the auspices of Python-based programming. So over the last few years, people have been using our open source products to build wonderful data apps that are interactive, handling very large data sets, and being able to visualize that for our large finance and non-finance customers. We have a platform that we call Data Enterprise that's built on top of our open source solution that allows people to build these applications much faster, much simpler, and be able to deploy those with scale and authentication. So delighted to spend time with you talking a little bit about what we are doing.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting stuff. And, the session that you'll be talking about at Europe is going to be around how AI enhances the delivery and usage of those data apps. AI is going to be a really big theme of this episode and likely of the conference itself, as you can probably imagine. I'd like to start by talking at a really high level about where banks are from your perspective when it comes to adopting AI. It's obviously something that most of them are thinking about at this point, but from what you can see, are they following through?
I think so. I think, in the past, obviously, a lot of the emphasis has been on the end solution. A lot of our customers in the finance space have been running predictive models that are based on ML and AI and really want a data app, a user interface that is going to enable them to be able to run those models in real time, simulate what might happen in the future, and be able to run those predictions as often as they need to. But probably where I've seen in the last sort of 12 months is that people are also using ML and AI as a way to perhaps improve the interpretation of those data apps. So from a simple, bar chart, line chart, scatter plot that we might have in a single data application, how can I perhaps enhance that with additional data around things like world and market events to be able to give the end user a little bit more information about what was happening, perhaps when they see certain conditions being met on those charts. So I think from the end user perspective, we're certainly seeing quite a lot of demand in that area. The other side, of course, is development. People want to continue to develop apps much faster. They want to do so with less resources. So all of the development process is looking towards AI as a way to improve, the efficiency of building data apps.
Yeah, I think these are two sides of a similar coin. And obviously the idea of just the sheer scope of data that we have available now is mind-boggling. And especially when you think about how relevant a lot of this data is, it's amazing. And you can get a sense of the power behind some of these tools that are out there right now. From your perspective, where do you think banks have done a really good job of implementing AI? Where have they kind of taken advantage of a lot of these opportunities that are before them now?
Yeah, I think today, perhaps in the predictive analytics world, they've been using a lot of models that they've been building over the years. They've done a really good job of being able to write and use and utilize those. And now they want a way to be able to integrate those into a single application that's going to combine the kind of the UI level of the end user that can integrate with that, the models that have been created, and now, of course, the large language models that are running inside and outside the organization to add additional context to those applications. So I think in the predictive analytics, the complex forecasting type applications, they've done a really, really good job. They're starting to move into that kind of development cycle too, that ability to be able to use these types of tools to build things much easier and faster. Yeah, I think that's where perhaps their biggest success has been over the past months and years.
Yeah, I think that has the ring of truth to it. What about the other side of the coin, where we're looking at maybe areas that they haven't done as well, where they struggled to take advantage of what's out there?
Yeah, of course, it's a highly regulated market. So, explainability, trust, risk are all big words for these large organizations, and they can't just go off and consume anything that's there on the internet. So, whereas some perhaps not so highly regulated organizations can take a lot of benefit of this, they've probably been a little bit slower to be able to adopt that in order to explain what they want to use and why they want to use it internally. And I think that's both on the end user side of it as well as the development side of it. So perhaps, they've erred towards maybe more internal solutions to start being able to use large language models that are surfaced inside their own organization rather than just, carte blanche what's available on the internet.
It is always interesting when you have to compare solutions for the financial services industry to solutions built for other less heavily regulated industries, and you can see how fast some of those other industries can go. A lot of times here in fintech, we kind of look longingly over and say, "Man, I wish we could go that fast." But I think it is a fair point. There's a lot of potential risk associated, and so when you've got that potential risk, you've got the idea that a regulator might come in and have something to say about it. It does make it a little more challenging to kind of jump in with both feet. When you think about what is preventing banks from kind of engaging with artificial intelligence to the degree that maybe they could or even should, obviously that regulatory side of it is a big factor. What do you think is the other sort of big limiting factor here? Is it a technical limitation? Is it a mentality shift that kind of needs to happen on the part of the executives of these organizations, saying actually there's not as much risk here as maybe there was even a couple of years ago? Or is there something else altogether that is kind of putting a lot of downward pressure here?
I think sometimes it can be educational too. Sometimes it can be that these, AI is a very technical solution that's come up from very technical people. And sometimes we have to explain these things about trust and explainability to people that are running the C-suite. So it can be a little bit of, educational explainability. We know that what AI is really capable of being. So, mentality, education, these are things that are going to have to shift if people do want to be able to absorb, things like probabilistic models over what we've been running for the last, 50 years, which is deterministic models. So I do think that explainability, being able to educate people in the C-suite about risk and trust are very important aspects of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about, Plotly specifically. You gave us a nice overview at the beginning, but how does Plotly come in and help ease some of these pressures, ease some of these concerns, and make it easier for banks to engage more productively when it comes to using AI around their own, data apps or other applications?
Yeah, I guess primarily why we're a little bit different from some of the old dashboarding tools is we have a fundamental difference in that we're an application rather than a dashboard. And what that means is it gives us the ability to be able to interact with other technology. Think of us as being, the conductor of an orchestra. We're there as the UI layer that can coordinate and consolidate other technology across the estate. So if the bank wants to be running, probabilistic models that are running in technologies like Databricks or Snowflake or any other technology, you're able to conduct that from a Dash application itself. You're able to interact with the data, call an API from Databricks, update some data back into Snowflake. That central being a conductor in the middle of everything is what fundamentally differentiates an application from just a dumb dashboard, if you like. So I think from the end user perspective, that side of it. Probably on the building side of it, the ability to start to leverage some of these AI tools to make things, easier and faster to build. Data scientists have traditionally used Python as a way to build applications. They love everything in Python. They like C in Python. Python's a great tool to use as a data scientist, but sometimes we want additional tools to be able to help us to build those data apps. So Plotly's made a huge investment in AI in order to be able to chat into a simple interface to be able to say, build me a box plot with these particular parameters in it, and it will build everything for you. So that investment in being able to build and deploy those applications much faster, as well as the end user having that ability to, be that conductor and orchestrate all of the different technologies, I think is what sets us apart.
Yeah, absolutely. One question that I had, I know that you don't just live in the financial services space, that you actually, that Plotly engages with companies from a lot of different verticals. How does the financial space differ in terms of how people are using it? Or, what are you seeing from your side about ways that the industry kind of operates a little bit more differently than some of the other ones? I think this is one of those areas where it'd be good just to get a perspective outside the bubble, so to speak, something that, maybe we don't know about our own industry.
No, it is kind of interesting. And obviously some of the apps are different. The one that springs to mind might be, the NHS app, the National Health Service here in the UK, where, Plotly is being used there, that as a patient walk into a hospital, I want that ability to be able to be triaged in real time, to be able to take my conditions, and I want to run probabilistic models on perhaps where I am likely to need treatment down the line. Am I likely to need a hospital bed? What type of doctor am I likely to need? That element of predictive analytics, as soon as I'm being triaged walking into a hospital, is radically different from, the old days of walking into a hospital, sitting on a chair for 4 hours, waiting for a doctor to see me, and then, perhaps at the end of a very long day being told there's no bed available. So these types of predictive analytics, these types of applications that people are building, sometimes a little different from finance, a lot of geospatial type apps, there is commonality there across the estate, but also you can see perhaps some differences there with what people are trying to do in finance today.
That's a really good example of what's possible in a way that I think is very easy to understand. And obviously, the situation you described is light years away from what we've got here in the U.S. It's the experience. The second example that you have there is much, much closer to the truth than what is possible, certainly from a technological standpoint. I want to close by just kind of coming back up to this really high level. When you think about 2025, even into early 2026, what do you see as kind of changes on the horizon in terms of how banks are playing with AI? What's happening in the AI space? What big shifts are going to become possible? Obviously, this is something we'll see a lot of on stage at Finovate Europe next week. But what do you think are we likely to see in terms of some of these big industry-wide changes?
Yeah, I think as we talk to some of those kind of challenges that people have in terms of education, explainability, and trust, I think people are going to have to focus a lot more on that. I mean, if you look at Plotly itself, when we talk about being able to append information to one of those line charts to be able to say, I know what happened over the last few years. The trust comes from being able to use any large language model, just not what is available on the internet, but ones that are running and been generated by banks themselves. So I think a lot of software vendors in this market are going to have to, play catch up in that world. It's not just enough to say we can connect to ChatGPT, or whatever LLM of choice it is, but being able to adhere to what the regulator is deeming. And that might mean running large language models behind the bank. That might mean explainability. That might mean that as I build these applications using AI type chat, it automatically creates code that I can review and give to the regulator as well. So all of these are just going to become part and parcel of what people are building as we move into 2025 and beyond, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how all these changes evolve. And I think one thing is for sure, this is an area that kind of demands everybody's attention right now. This is an area where the regulators are certainly paying attention. The customers are certainly paying attention. So all banking executives need to be really focusing a lot on this space as well and trying to make sure that they're getting what they can out of it while operating safely, while putting those kind of guardrails in place where they need to be. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see. And of course, it'll be fascinating to see how our audience responds to your talk next week. Looking forward to seeing you in person there in London in just a little bit. In the meantime, thanks so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Really appreciate it.
The Finovate podcast is produced by Informa Connect in association with Provoke.fm Media. Check out Finovate.com for information on Finovate's upcoming shows and to learn how you can get involved. The discount code Finovate Podcast will save you 20% on tickets to all of our events. And you can email us at info@finovate.com for information on sponsoring, speaking, or demoing. Thanks for listening.